Well, here we are live on a Sunday morning. It's Coffee with Cioffi and Coffee with Cioffi and Rayo.
Rayo.
Rayo. And so I'm wearing my I Take Weather Serious T-shirt.
I just had to turn down the volume on YouTube here.
Okay, so you didn't
I
hear me say
I
that.
take weather serious.
Serious.
Serious. Serious.
Serious. Yes, the chairman got this for me, I think, for my birthday, if I remember correctly, along with my Coffee with Cioffi. At the time was Coffee and Cioffi, but now it's Coffee with Cioffi and Rayo weather mug. So,
Well, here my shirt tells you where we all are in the universe, or at least in the
well, stand up. I can't see. I see little what looks like stars.
can you
Oh,
see?
we're in the
It's
midst of that whirlpool.
you are here. There you are.
Yes,
All right.
exactly.
So
So I think we should, I think we're at the point now where I think we should advocate putting out warnings that are practical, okay, from the standpoint of weather, okay, and I think we should put out "Don't plant your tomatoes yet" warning in lieu of the very chilly-looking weather pattern that's setting up for this week and particularly next weekend.
Joe, did you see? And
By
I
the way,
know.
your chin's off the
All right. How
fix your
about if I do
camera.
this?
That's it. Now
That
you're perfect. Go
that works.
ahead.
I have a different camera angle today. Did you see the European ensemble model for 240 hours?
No, I listen. I didn't look at it, and here's the thing. And I said, I've addressed this a few times in the wintertime with you. The European and the ensembles, and then the control, and all the rest of it. It really becomes an exercise of just digging as far enough as you can until you find the right model that shows something absolutely ridiculous and dire. So I mean, that's kind of how I see it. Yes, and
This was about as ridiculous as we've ever seen. Just I'm not going to ask you to. Well, first of all, I could send it to you if you'd like to see it and put it on the board for everybody, but it's totally useless. But and we know the way the European worked this winter season
right.
horribly after day 5. I mean, it could go for the end of the world for all we cared. But
Right, and it's been doing this on and off for the last several days. If you, for those of you who haven't seen it, it keeps forming. It was trying to form some kind of deep low offshore. This nor'easter, cold air,
well,
snow,
this wasn't
all this
really
nonsense.
this scenario was not necessarily a coastal system. This was a scenario of an unusually strong dome of high pressure, cold high pressure, I might
Right.
add, settling in over the northeastern United States, eastern Canada,
Mm-hmm.
and actually it doesn't really look like a major storm, but all you need
It was
when
just
you
some
have a big high
overrunning.
like that is some sort of disturbance to penetrate into that high pressure zone, create kind of like an inverted trough. They
Yeah.
had a little low pressure system over North Carolina, and you can see how the bending of the isobars. Any case, what this results in, according to the European, a week from this Wednesday, is a swat of snow, something like 11 inches of snow in western Maryland,
Yeah, I
10
saw it.
inches of
I
snow
saw
over
that, and a
the,
lot of that was Then the Europe, some of the other variations of the European. Look, it's May. I mean, come on, seriously. It's like it's how many. I don't even know what to say about it. It's just look. The cold part of it is probably going to be true to a large extent. We are going to get very chilly, especially next weekend, where we might actually have some late. I think we might actually see some late season freezes in some areas that normally are done with 32-degree temperatures
right.
for nights. I don't think that's anything controversial to say, given the pattern that we're going into, and the upper flow is one that certainly would favor it being colder than average for the next 10 days to maybe 2 weeks. It also lines up pretty well with what the CDC folks are doing. Yeah, the rest of it's just additional torture for snow lovers, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah,
It's
if
silly.
if you look at this, what it's been cooking up, I mean, this would rival May 9th, 1977, in that we had flurries here in New York, and some places north and west of the city had a foot of snow. I mean, and we're talking about, May the 12th.
I know you're talking about. Look, you can even if it was correct, you're asking someone to look at what's in front of them right now in terms of what's happening and what's going to be happening in the upper air, and possibly come to a once in 100 year conclusion, or once in 150-year conclusion, that we're going to get this kind of weather event. That is not, um, that's not forecast material. That's fantasy material. Okay,
Right, right,
especially 10 days out. It's
right.
even in the dead of winter, you're not going to do that. So yeah, I mean, I know it's in the end. At the end of the day, it's all very silly.
It is, but still, it's interesting. I said to a friend of mine, I said, it's not going to happen. There's no way in the world that this can transpire. We know how bad the European has been beyond 5 days. But then I put three dots in the message and I said, but wouldn't it be great to see that take place?
Well, we all would kind of
Oh, God, that would
probably
be,
very quietly would say, um, you say that's the case. Uh, yeah, but it ain't gonna happen. So we'll just leave it at that. So it
I will
was
say
beautiful.
that, I will say Climate Prediction Center yesterday on their 6 to 10 day prog, very impressive. They have us now fully into the 80% probability of below normal temperatures, 90% over the lower Great Lakes. I mean, if you go on their site and check out the 6 to 10 day and even the 8 to 14 day progs, I mean, to see the eastern third of the country enveloped in deep, deep shades of blue, it's like, where was this in January and February? This is absolutely incredible. And you're right. If I were a gardener, I would not plant anything out there, especially these little tender seedlings or whatever like that, until sometime after the middle or latter part of this month, because it doesn't look like it's going to be getting very mild. Although today is like the oasis. It's like the one day, and even yesterday, the one
Yesterday was just
day we
was
had the great
spectacular.
mild weather.
Yesterday was spectacular.
Yeah.
I mean, it really was. It was just absolutely spectacular day.
You remember
Uh,
2 years ago?
2 years ago on this date,
Right,
so that would be May 3rd, 2018.
right.
No.
We were in the throes of an early season heat wave. Although we never did go to 3 days, we had 2 days of temperatures throughout the tri-state area at or above 90 degrees. I think New York City either set or broke, either tied or broke two records. I think today we had 92 in 2018 at Central Park. Even Westchester Airport had 90. So you talk about how nice and mild it was yesterday. It was just downright hot here 2 years ago.
Yeah, yeah. By the way, I should just say a quick welcome to all my folks from my Facebook page who are watching this morning, and also from the meteorologist Joe Cioffi weather app, which you can download for free on Google Play or on the App Store. And there are folks watching the live stream today from that. So we like that. So I'm looking at the week ahead, Mr. Rayo, and I'm thinking it is going to be relatively quiet in the Northeast and the northern mid Atlantic states. It doesn't look like there's any really major storm ahead or major system ahead. Um, Severe weather in the United States. There's one day in the next several that probably has to be watched to an extent, but not seeing widespread severe weather wipeouts at this point. Uh, but one thing I will say is that when we get that cold air mass, when it comes down at the end of next week and going into next weekend and beyond, that may eventually set up maybe it'll set up a widespread severe weather event because of just the magnitude of the cold air and the fact that it's coming down in the month of May. So that might be something to look out in the longer term. But at least this week doesn't really look like there's a whole lot happening really.
No, we're going to be, I think, grazed with something maybe on Wednesday, and maybe toward the end of next this week we'll have another uh, slight bit of unsettled weather to deal with. But basically speaking, this will be a quiet week, but it'll also be progressively a chillier week. Now, tomorrow, it's going to be a real shock tomorrow because we'll be accustomed to temperatures today in the mid, even upper 70s. Tomorrow, at least up here in the lower Hudson Valley, we may have a tough time cracking or getting much above 60. And we'll also be dealing with winds gusting past 30 miles an hour, which will make it feel quite a bit chillier than it really is.
Right now, just pulled up the 11 a.m. obs. Now, some places have temperatures being impacted by leftover cloud cover. Other places, not so much. But so actually, you have a fairly wide range here this morning as we head toward the midday hour. It's mostly 50s in south and low 60s in southeastern New England and over eastern half of Long Island. That's because I'm dealing with a southwest. I'm sorry, a southwest wind here, so there's a little bit of, of an ocean flow there. You go back through New Jersey. Some spots are in the upper 60s to near 70. Other spots are only in the low 60s. You head down into Maryland. And Virginia, and you've got a whole host of ranges here. Some places are in the upper 50s, some places are in the low 60s, some places are in the low 70s. So a lot depends on whether you've got some sun going, working or not. This time of year, the sun play can easily distort things very, very quickly, and so can the clouds. And you'll go down into central and southern Virginia and North Carolina, temperatures there in the mid to upper 70s with a west wind. There's a little bit of a frontal boundary that's lying in between, a weak one, and that's just going to, that's going to create some issues today. But overall, Joe, I mean, I've got sunshine here. I've got a fair amount of sunshine. There's very little going on across the nation in terms of actual weather. There's a severe thunderstorm watch in parts of southwestern Missouri that's gone up. You've got some flood watches in some counties in West Virginia. You've got a few counties in Northern California in the mountains that actually have winter weather advisories up at the moment. But other than that, it's fairly dead. And the loop, actually, Joe, the satellite loop, it's dry. Clear skies, Great Lakes to the north, to New York State, northern Pennsylvania, northernmost New Jersey to about me. Then you got all these clouds that are running in this east-west band that's coming from the Central Plains straight to the Jersey-Delaware coast.
Right, right. And as I mentioned, maybe several days ago, show you how weird this winter and early spring has been for us, is that I don't think we had a single red flag warning. We always have some red flag warnings flying during late March and April and now into early May. And we've yet to see any of that. For other parts
Yeah,
of the country, yeah, but for us, it has not been, we have not had a prolonged period of dry and warm weather with gusty winds for them to post a red flag warning. So that's one of the things that we have not seen around here so far this season. It may very well happen down the road, but it doesn't look like it's going to be happening anytime soon for us.
yeah. The month of April was a wet one, well above average in terms of rainfall. So that's also an issue. You got to string together. I mean, it's fast to go from. It can go quickly from being very wet to very dry this time of year because of how strong the sun is. I mean, if you have 4 or 5 sunny days, uh, you can easily create dry conditions that create red flag issues, but we haven't really quite seen that yet. Look on the loop, folks. You can see the dry uh, tongue of air that runs from the northern plains straight into the northeast. You've got this gorgeous high and beautiful, clear, sunny skies in the southeastern part of the U.S. down into Florida. Florida is going to see record highs today, up around 90 degrees. It's going to be in the 80s up into parts of as far north as North Georgia and into South Carolina. The Southwest is relatively quiet down into southernmost California. The Northwest seeing some action there, and of course, right in between this area that's up to the north. That's your northern jet, by the way. That's in play there. That's bringing that drier air that's over the northern plains to the Great Lakes into the northeast. And then, of course, you've got this frontal boundary right in the middle that's producing some showers and even a few thunderstorms. This is the blow up that we're seeing with regards to the severe weather that SPC is looking at with their severe thunderstorm watch. And here's the latest radar, by the way. Still a little band of showers there across northern West Virginia into, central West Virginia, southern Ohio, central West Virginia, northern Virginia, Maryland, and moving basically east southeast. There's nothing of consequence in the northeast, and there's nothing of consequence in the southeast. And then you've got these big storms in southwest Missouri. So even the radar, Joe, pretty very very quiet.
Yes, very quiet indeed, and quiet is nice for a change. Although again, noticeably chillier. It would be nice if we had a quiet spell of weather with mild temperatures, but again, as we progress through this week, it's going to turn chillier, and the coldest air apparently lies in wait and is yet to arrive here. That may be waiting until next weekend and on into the following week, and that, of course, also leads us, and I guess led the European ensemble into projecting abnormally cold and also potentially snowy weather about 9 or 10 days down the road.
Well, since our air is coming up from Canada, from central and northern Canada, and even up into the Arctic region, this is what's left, by the way, of all of the cold air that was pooled up in the Arctic region all winter long. And of course, once the polar vortex weakened up at the stratosphere and fell apart and split in two, you're getting these leftover cold air masses uh, kind of playing themselves out until they disappear and everything warms up. But just showing, on the surface this morning, for example, there's a 1028 high that's up on the western shores of Hudson Bay, and you're looking at temperatures here that are running in the coldest spots are in the teens and low 20s, and then when you run up even further north, you start getting up, up toward northernmost Canada near uh, the Arctic north slope of Alaska. That's where you're still seeing temperatures that are running below zero. Remember, it's for the adjusting for their daylight is getting longer and longer. They don't have much of a they have a shrinking amount of nighttime, and pretty soon they're going to go to 24 hours of daylight in those areas on the north slope. But my point is that the cold air that's coming down is it's always relative to the time of year you're dealing with. If you want to make it an equivalent, I suppose for those of you who are down in the coast, you could say that just take the anomalies and then subtract it out in the dead of winter. We're talking about daytime highs that would be running mostly in the 20s to maybe near 30. So at least from what we're seeing now. And then for the weekend, when the anomalies get larger, you'd probably be the equivalent of, say, a day in the dead of winter where temperatures wouldn't be getting out of 20s. That's basically what I'm doing, is I'm seasonally adjusting things. And you see, by the way, on the surface, you got a series of weak fronts that are analyzed on the map today. One moving through the northeast into the mid-Atlantic, and then you've got another weak one back up in the northern lakes, and you have still another one that's north of Lake Superior. So when your flow's coming from that direction, their weather fronts will be coming from that direction.
Right, right. And I noticed that the north slope of Alaska, I guess Barrow, on that map, you had temperature. We saw a temperature of -2. That's Fahrenheit
Yes.
now, right? That's not Celsius.
Yeah, these are all Fahrenheit
Right.
maps.
That's pretty good for early May.
Yeah,
Negative 2 degrees.
that's pretty cool. It is. The polar bears are still liking it because it slows the melting of the ice,
And you know,
so
and
they
you know,
can catch the seals they need to eat.
I'm glad you mentioned polar bears because um, I saw somebody on one of the national news shows a while back talking about how the polar bear, basically the polar bear is the poster child of global warming and climate change, and oh, the poor polar bears and everything else. And I said to myself, well, maybe that's so, but this year, and people think that because of global warming, there's no more cold air. The cold air is somehow
Right.
disappearing, and everybody, even places up near the North Pole, is warming up to abnormal, that kind of stuff. But this was the one winter out of the last couple of decades, I guess. But this is the one winter because the polar vortex bottled up that cold air that everywhere north of the Arctic Circle was either at or even below normal temperature wise.
Oh
It
yeah.
was one of the coldest winters in Alaska. That
And
that
this and that by the way impacted the sea ice, the highest it's been since I think 2012.
Correct,
You
correct.
know,
I said this is one year where the polar bears were having a ball because the polar bears were probably enjoying themselves.
sure,
It's being the best time. So it's not like all of a sudden it's going away and it's not there anymore. If it was just a matter of the vagaries of the jet stream, the polar vortex, all of the upper air, locking that cold air in where it really belongs,
yeah. Well,
and and then
if you look at 1112, if you look at the winter of 1112 in terms of the polar vortex, and you look at the winter of last year, um, they actually are very similar in terms of the structure of what went on in the stratosphere. But the big difference was that 1112 was a big El Nino year. I always forget this, whether it was the no, it was a big I think it was a big El Nino year in 1112. And this year was a non-issue. There was neither an El Nino or a La Nina, so that's kind of baffled a lot of folks that you had this sort of El Nino-ish looking polar vortex setup, or La Nina, super La Nina polar vortex setup, and even though you didn't actually have either one. So I would just say the takeaway in my mind through all of this, Joe, is that uh, as usual with weather, as soon as you figured out a pattern, okay, it stops working, and I think that's what most people, that's what we're seeing here. Another example of that.
yes,
All right.
that's absolutely true. I'm calling up my own set of maps here because you're running behind by about a minute or so. So I'm trying
Yeah.
to keep up with you in my
Okay,
own.
so I'm going to the severe SPC's severe weather forecast for the next few days.
Right.
As at least for today, they actually have a very narrow banana-shaped looking risk area that is set up from southern Missouri, northern Arkansas, northern Tennessee, southern much of Kentucky into West Virginia, and then a marginal risk that kind of envelopes that into a slightly bigger banana that runs through northern Virginia to Maryland and the Delmarva Peninsula, and even just touches ever so slightly southern New Jersey.
I
Uh,
mean, the banana analogy is great because of the various colors, and there you have the slight with yellow, and that does look like a banana on its side there.
And tomorrow, just to change shapes, tomorrow, Joe, we have a boomerang with a marginal risk handled in one side in West Texas, on the other side in Georgia and South Carolina. It reaches its apex. It's literally shaped like a boomerang. Reaches its apex at from Kansas City to St. Louis, and there's an embedded boomerang inside of it. So it's a smaller boomerang of slight risk. So we've got a banana risk today, a double banana risk today, a double boomerang risk for tomorrow.
Right. That yellow part, the boomerang, doesn't look aerodynamically correct. You could much better to use the green part as opposed to the yellow part.
Right. And on day three, which is for Tuesday into Wednesday, we have neither a banana nor a boomerang because there isn't much other than a couple of areas of general thunderstorms. And I'm looking at day four, potential too low, day five, predictability. Hold on, it's turning too quickly here. So day four, potential too low, day five, predictability too low, day six, predictability too low, day seven, potential too low, and day eight, potential too low. So
Right.
they have it all figured out.
Right.
Okay, so let's go to the upper air and take a look at what's happening this week. I'm going to bring up the GFS 500. And for those of you, by the way, who want to read more about this, I actually wrote a piece last night and a piece today on my meteorologist joechaffee.com website. You could take a look at that. Also, if you're on my Patreon platform, you could read about it as well. But you look at this upper air, Mr. Rayo, and the trough continues to be pretty much in the east, and you have this long fetch. I just pushed it to Wednesday, where if you want to just kind of connect the dots, you got this long fetch jet that runs from the Arctic into central Canada, and then swings southeast toward the South Atlantic coast. The flow is split because you do have a southern jet that's coming in off the coast of California from a deep upper low that's in the Gulf of Alaska, so that's shooting weather systems in, and that's the jet for Wednesday night. And as we move through the rest of the week and into next weekend, you're dealing with a vortex that basically comes down south of James Bay and just, I mean, this is cold. There's just no other way to describe it. This is a very cold upper air look, and this starts to arrive sometime on Saturday and then lasts right into now we're at to May 12th, 13th. And even though that first trough eventually does lift out, another one's right behind it going into the long range out around day 12, 13, and 14. So now we're past the middle part of the month of May, and it's still looking incredibly cold for this time of year with this jet stream pattern set up the way it is.
Yep, yep. It is. It is going to look. It looks like it's going to stay cold. In fact, if you looked at the 3 to 4 week, excuse me, the 3 to 4 week experimental probability maps from Climate Prediction Center, they pretty much have indicated or telegraphed that they feel that the entire month of May is just going to be below normal. I mean, all the way out to the end of the month, there doesn't seem to be any sign of any significant warming trend, at least in the eastern half of the country. So uh, I hope it's not going to be, so far below normal that the people won't be able to plant their things until the end of the month. But it really does look like these kind of days that we have today and yesterday are going to be few and far between in the days and weeks to come.
I think that this week, at least, that we are not going to have to worry too much on from the standpoint of rain because I'm just not seeing it. I want to let's bring up it's 11:30, so we're just starting with the new GFS. This is what I hate about this. This is at least in when we're on standard time, we would have already had enough of the new GFS. Now it just comes out too late. But
I know,
we're always complaining
but
about
you know
that.
what, Joe? It doesn't matter. Even if we were under the old rules, which would mean that daylight saving time wouldn't start until the very end of April, we'd still be in
We
daylight
still
saving.
need to be on daylight saving time. Yeah, I get it. Okay, so looking at the surface map, first the NAM, which there's gonna be a little bit of a wave that develops on this frontal boundary that's lying to the south across the northern mid-Atlantic states, and that might bring a little batch of showers and storms into eastern Virginia. That's where SPC's got their severe weather risk, and again, it kind of skims southern New Jersey. That low moves out. And then this high builds down from eastern Canada. And as you said, Mr. Rayo, the gradient does tighten up a bit tomorrow and into tomorrow night, even into early Tuesday morning. It's still a bit breezy from New York City east. Then, of course, you've got the next energy moving out of the plains. And this looks like it's going to get suppressed rather far to our south. The only thing I'm concerned about, I guess, for say from later Tuesday night into Wednesday night is the fact that the flow is kind of onshore-ish, that we may just wind up getting into clouds and where it's a broken to overcast kind of day. But I don't think we're going to see much rain out of this. And then just running ahead to we'll use the 6Z GFS because that's the last full run that we have. And of course, we get toward the end of the week. Here's this next front and low, and we're at Tuesday here, but let me just roll fast a little. I'll go a little fast. Get toward the end of the week. We've got another front and low that approaches for Friday and Friday night, which the GFS is kind of suppressing to an extent, and it's got this little patch Saturday morning of dark blue snow in northeastern Virginia and western Maryland. By the way, low develops out there, and this brings down. Look at this cold big high, a 1037 high on the 192 hour near Lake Winnipeg, Joe. This big amorphous cold surface high uh, spreading out uh, effectively and dropping southward down into Kansas and Oklahoma, going into that long range forecast period. And again, you look at this upper air, this is what's happening. Our air is coming from up there. It's the whole northern jet is what's in charge here. I mean, this is. I keep going back to the fact, Joe. You go look at this upper air like this. If this were January and February, the snow lovers and cold weather lovers would be dancing in the streets over this.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. It's an upside down. It's an upside down year so far, weather-wise for us, Joe. It
yeah,
really is.
it certainly is. So I would. I'm going to come back full screen. So let's do that.
Thank you, Javon Perry, for your super chats contribution. He says, "I can't wait until next winter to be the same thing. Just can't wait. I mean, really, if this were January, March, it'd be like 2014, 2015, or 2013, 2014. Just so sad, but keep hearing for a mad hurricane season." Well, we'll see.
Well, there's a
Sixty.
lot of stuff out there that's pointing to the Northeast maybe being a bit more at risk this year. But I would just caution that uh, you saw some of those forecasts. I'm not trying to. I'm not criticizing anyone's specific forecast with regards to the hurricane season. I actually kind of think it makes sense that maybe this is a year where the Northeast might be a little bit more, and the Mid Atlantic states might be a bit more at risk, if only because of the fact that it's been a while. So it's got to happen eventually. But I would just be careful because what we're seeing now, pattern-wise, may not necessarily translate the way you might think when we get to the heart of hurricane season. We'll see, but I'm just putting it out there because there was a lot out there going into this winter that said that said one thing, and it turned out to be quite another.
And you mentioned this before. Suppose we're into August or September and we're still practicing social distancing, and there's a hurricane that, let's say, came in from the Gulf of Mexico and slammed into the Gulf Coast, and there were people who needed to be moved to, let's say, a shelter or someplace where a
Yep.
lot of people have to converge in one relatively small, edifice. And how does that work? I mean, what do you do then? I
That
mean,
there are going to be a lot of challenges. I mean, they've got those challenges now in those severe weather states when they've got tornado warnings that go up, and if they're asking people if they can't shelter, if they have to actually go to a shelter. Um, I mean, I don't know how they're handling that, and it's got to be. This is one of the things. I keep coming back to this point that I just love the armchair quarterbacks that seem to have all the answers. They always seem to have all the answers. This is a very, very complicated situation that we're in. There are no easy answers. None. There's nothing that doesn't. There's no answer to any problem. And here are two of them that we've just illustrated, Joe. There are no answers to any problem that doesn't pose some kind of a risk. And I don't know. It, it's very hard for me to criticize, what certain decisions. And every state is different too. That's another thing. Every state is different.
right.
And just what came to my mind. Think about if you think about the reactions that people generally have when it comes to hurricane evacuations, i.e., they don't want to and they choose not to. It really is it any different? Is it really any different than what we're going through right now with people, whether regards to whether they're social distancing or not social distancing, or wearing masks versus not wearing masks? It's the same thing. Uh, I don't know. I really wish that people had, to put it quite frankly, I really wish people had a better education in science and math. I really do. We're
Yeah.
so one thing that this whole experience and in weather, we've said this for years. It's so clearly evident how many people have no little or no understanding about how things work in the planet that we live in. They don't understand biology. They don't understand chemistry. They don't understand physics. They don't understand basic math. Okay, they don't understand, why something growing exponentially. Um,
Right.
and
That's the big joke is, like, people say, well, what does exponential mean? The rise in coronavirus cases. What exactly is that? That strange looking curve, you know?
yeah,
I, and there was a cartoon I posted on Facebook where you see a professor at the front of the classroom explaining about exponential rise or exponential increase, and two of the students, one of them is saying to the other, says, "Yeah, like we're going to use this after we leave here."
exactly. Yes.
It's
Well,
and
but even more
sad,
so.
and a
But
sad,
go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, and a really sad thing, as you said, how people don't seem to understand or grasp even the simplest of concepts. Many years ago, I would say it's about 15 years ago, I was writing, still am writing for a specific magazine, which has been around for over a century. I have a column, an astronomy monthly column in that magazine, and there was a span of a few years where there was a young lady who was the fact checker, quote unquote, the person who looked at various things that appeared in the magazine and would make various corrections. And I wrote an essay about how easy it is to demonstrate phases of the moon. Ask anybody, pull somebody off the street and say, how does the moon change phase? How does it go from full to half to three quarters? And I'll bet you most people wouldn't know how to explain that. Well, I explained it by saying take a simple tennis ball, you go outside, you stand, and then as you hold the tennis ball up, let the sun fall on the tennis ball. And the way you move the tennis ball relative to the sun, changing the angle of illumination, shows various phases on the tennis ball. A very simple way of demonstrating phasing of the moon. Would you believe this fact checker eliminated that essay? And I said, what did you do that for? And get this response now. She said, well, I look at things in such a manner as if I were my mother. And I figured that if my mother couldn't understand the explanation, then it wouldn't be understood by the average reader. So that's why I'm eliminating your essay, because I think it's much too difficult for my mother to understand and for most people to understand. And I got into such a we went back and forth, with this. I was so upset. And finally I said, this is so rudimentary. This is something that they teach in second grade. This is something a 7-year-old
Yep.
would understand. And her comment back was, oh, in other words, you're saying that I have the mentality of a 7-year-old.
Yeah, that's about right. You do. You do have the
Yeah,
mentality of a 7-year-old. You're
it's
a
incredible.
moron.
And
The
and I'm
person you
happy.
spoke, this person you spoke to, was a moron. I mean, a
Well,
real moron.
I'm happy to tell you that soon afterwards she left that position at the magazine. And you know what? What's very sad? She went on to a radio show, an NPR radio show, which deals with science on a weekly basis. And she was one of the quote producers. And I said to myself, and I know the host. I'm not going to mention the name of the host, but if you know NPR and you know the science program I'm referring to, I said to myself, I'm so sorry for the host of that show having to have her as a producer, because it just blew my mind. But you're absolutely right. The knowledge of science, the knowledge of concepts is so horrible
Zero.
compared to 20 and 30 years ago.
Well,
Amazing.
look, in general, I kind of describing that. One of the things that I've come to a number of conclusions over the last couple of weeks. At least via social media, and that is, first off, you know now who exactly slept through math and science in high school. Okay. I mean, those were the classes that they went in and put their head down and either walked out with a D or failed it. Okay. They've all made themselves, publicly known. Um, the thing that gets me too, and this is also weather related because we deal with this with tropical storms and with hurricanes, at least with respect to when you put the information out, is actually fighting the we've been dealing with the weather control freaks and the geoengineering freaks, which they actually have gone very silent lately. I don't know. Maybe I'm opening up a can of worms here. I haven't really seen. I usually get a whole bunch of those types of posts. I haven't really seen any of them. In the comment section. By the way, for anybody who's watching on YouTube, I have not I'm playing catch up when it comes to the comments. So if you leave comments on individual videos, uh, I get to them eventually. Just be patient. I apologize. And I see everybody's got their own um, uh, opinions on our chat board, of course, and I'm just happy everybody's being respectful. I'm going to wonder though if we ever have another hurricane. At least from the standpoint of having another hurricane heading up here into the Northeast, or certainly in this area, you know that it's going to be taken seriously. So because of the experience from Sandy, that's been one of the outcomes with regards to Katrina and the Gulf Coast in and around New Orleans is that now they take it. Whenever there's a hurricane, they watch or warning, they take it seriously because they had that generational event. And that's another issue. See, that's the thing, Joe. These things are generation. These big events that you get in the weather world. These are and in the science world. Look, we have to go back over 100 years to find another really equivalent pandemic, the 1918
Right.
flu pandemic. These big major hurricanes that hit, in terms of the geographic areas that they hit, uh, those are also generational events. You don't get hurricanes crossing the same point every year, year after
Right.
year after year.
Absolutely.
And given the fact that their scope is really usually several hundred miles in terms of impact, and maybe 100 miles of solid impact, you get these generational events that impact a huge amount of geography and impact a huge amount of people. Those people that survive it have it etched in their memories. It's when it, like I said, with the pandemic thing, we're talking about something that happened over 100 years ago. There ain't nobody left from that. Okay, I
Uh,
guess there's nobody left from that.
well, it's interesting because this morning on CBS Sunday Morning, before it was interrupted by, as it has been for the past several weeks, by Mayor De Blasio midway to talk about what we're going through here in New York City now. But they did have a very interesting story about polio and how that was not on the same scale as the Spanish flu, but how people were, uh, very, very much in fear of the polio.
Yes,
Scenario.
that was huge.
In fact, they even had some footage. It's so great. CBS, they must have like a storehouse of all of this stuff. Walter Cronkite doing a show about polio, the outbreak, back in the reviewing it from back in the 1960s, and to see all of the things that were going on in the 50s. This scourge of summer, as Edward R. Murrow referred to it as. So we've been through this from over the years, over the century, but and you're right. I think the biggest villain or the biggest thing we have going against us is time. If you don't have something of great magnitude that has not occurred in a very long period of time, then you just let your guard down,
Right.
and you always should have that guard up.
But
And,
let's also look at the positives. There are actually a lot of positives here. One is, in my view, um, we thanks to the specifics of Moore's law, which basically says that computer um, computer what's the word I'm looking for? Oh boy, memory. What a computers are able to do doubles every couple of years. Okay, if you think back to when the first PCs came out in the early 1980s, what those PCs can do, and what we can do now, like have our own television show, among other
right,
things,
radio
and
show TRS,
and what
80.
right, and what that has done is for people in the medical research field, the those that are working on new vaccines, new pharmaceuticals. I mean, what used to take years. I mean, literally, it would take years for doctors and the medical folks to get the DNA sequence to get the DNA sequence of a virus. It would take years, okay? And that has now been crunched down where they can get it within, months or just a couple of months.
Right.
Look at this with this coronavirus. How quickly they were able to get um, the virus, the DNA sequence, and basically that is the code. Okay, so you get the code of the virus, and now your job as a scientist is to, okay, how do we break this code? Okay,
Right.
they got to break the code. All right, that's kind of the easiest way to look at it, and you try all sorts of different things to manipulate it. I mean, that's incredible. It took, I think it took over 5 years, maybe even longer than that, for them to come up with the polio vaccine. Okay, the time to get a vaccine is also going to shorten if they can do it.
Right.
They can't all. I think depending on how the virus mutates or doesn't mutate can determine whether you can create a vaccine for it or not. But the point is that science has stepped up its game, okay, and continues to step up its game. If you think that this is all some sort of orchestrated, round of bullshit, then don't depend, then you shouldn't be depending on science to solve your problem, because for for those of you who feel that way, well, there's nothing that can fix it. So just remember that science is gonna figure this. They're gonna figure this out, and they've already started. Remdesivir was a huge development this week with
Right.
regards to the drugs. I just think it's really disconcerting. I watched Pandemic last night on Netflix. It was very interesting. I watched a couple of episodes of it, and you listen to the mindsets and how people think things through, but there's a certain element of what I said before. There's no easy answers here. None of
No.
this is easy. None of it. Okay. Nobody wants to see um, someone in their family die, from this disease.
Right.
Okay. No one. And on the same token, there are people and places in this country where the disease is not hit as hard as New York. We see this through New York City's eyes. We see this through the New York area's eyes. But there are places around the country where that hasn't quite happened, and you've got people that are literally on the balls of their ass because they can't work, and that's a serious thing. That's a serious thing for themselves and their relatives and their families and all this. I, I just think we need to do a little bit of trying to see, trying to kind of see it from someone else's perspective, and getting those people to also see it from our perspective. This is not
Right.
an this is not a simple thing. It just isn't. We can be
Right.
angry, we can be upset that no one wants to sit in their house every day. I can't stand it, okay? I go out for 10-mile walks. I hate it. But what am I going to do? You know,
Right.
what are you going to do? You could get out you could go play Green Acres with your tractor. At least you could do that.
I told my wife the other day. I said I almost feel like, and if she could be out there with the phone to take a picture of this, I'll get dressed up in a three-piece suit and go out on the tractor just like Eddie Albert did on Green Acres. Um, the one thing that different is that at least my tractor is built a little bit better than the tractor he bought from Mr. Haney for $35, I
For
might add.
$35, correct.
Uh, and Doctor, yeah, getting back to what you're talking about this potential cure for the coronavirus, Doctor
Well,
John,
it's not a cure. It's an antiviral. It's
an
like it would
antiviral,
be like Tamiflu.
correct. Dr. John LaPook had talked about when AIDS had broken out back in the early '80s, and how he had you look at you say to yourself, these are like broadcasters. No, these are actual physicians. These are actual doctors. Back then in the '80s, he was treating people for AIDS, and he said for the first 5 years, everybody he treated for AIDS died.
Yes.
And then in '86 or thereabouts, that's when Dr. Fauci, a much younger Dr. Fauci, I might add, came along and got very excited about the fact that they had found something to a preventative or something, as you just said, like Tamiflu, the equivalent of that for fighting off the AIDS virus. And now, of course, what we heard last week from Dr. Fauci was that he was so excited, he was about as excited as he was with that revelation about the AIDS thing back in the 80s. So that gives us great hope. If somebody of that stature, if Dr. Fauci feels like that, and believe me, Dr. Fauci would not simply toss on, well, maybe this will work, or I think this will. When somebody like Dr. Fauci says that this has a potential solution to the problem, that's something to get real
Yeah,
excited about.
I
So,
agree. David Schwartz pointing out the Salk vaccine came out in 1955, and Sabin's oral vaccine came out in 1961.
right.
Amazing. The other thing I would just say, with regards to all the stuff that's on there, there's so much information overload, both the medical stuff and the political stuff that's out there, because they go hand in hand, particularly that we have an election coming up. Fact check everything, okay? Everything, because uh, there is so much crap. I mean, really out and out lies, and I think people don't realize. They're reflexively. They are. I don't know why I got it into my head to do this, but it just really started to bother me, particularly the other day when I kept seeing this. Some people have been copying and pasting this one particular post about um, Gilead and remdesivir and Fauci, the connection with Bill Gates, and that this is all part of an effort, a global effort to get everybody vaccinated so that we can get everybody chipped, and all the rest of it. And they put together these coincidences that, okay, well, Fauci met with Bill Gates and such and such. Well, let me tell you something. If Dr. Fauci had not met Bill Gates somewhere along the way in his career, and if Bill Gates had not met Dr. Fauci somewhere in his long career, I would find that strange. Okay,
Yeah.
that would be strange. Okay, the fact that those two people would have met and had conversations, and it's people pick up on these things are constructed. They're not. Bear in mind that a lot of this stuff, they're constructed by foreign entities designed to get people in this country to fight, to argue, dissension, so etc. Whatever it is, whether it's just take the extra time. You'll do yourself a great service. Fact check everything. Just because something has been retweeted 1,000 times doesn't necessarily mean it's true. Just because your best friend uh, put it up doesn't mean it's true. Call people out on it. That's what I've been doing. I've been just basically saying, can you source this? I need you to source this, because if you're going to put this up, okay, and you're going to put something up that I know is clearly false, you need to source it to show me where it isn't, okay. And I give you just an example. The easy thing on that particular post that I was referring to, and you probably have seen it, because it kind of starts off with that the hydroxychloroquine pill cost 53 cents, and that the Gilead treatment cost $1,000. And that this was all, this is the Gilead, the Fauci-owned stock in Gilead, and all the rest of it. Well, let's break this down. This is an example, Joe. So I just did. So the hydroxychloroquine costing 53 cents a pill, all right, is probably correct when it's being prescribed for lupus and for rheumatoid arthritis, which is what it's supposed to be usually prescribed for. Doctors can prescribe it you know, offline. They think it could help you. They can certainly prescribe it to you in a hospital setting. All right. So the Gilead remdesivir treatment is not a pill. Okay, it's an IV. So right from the get go, they got it wrong. They got it wrong. Uh, it's an IV treatment that costs not apparently it costs about $9 for a 10-day regimen of remdesivir, and it's done IV. All right. So right there was incorrect. Gilead, as a company, from back a couple of months ago, said that they were going to give the drug away for free. If it turned out that remdesivir was effective, they weren't going to make any money on it. And they have said this over and over again. I was watching CNBC on Friday. They had the CEO of Gilead on, and explained how complicated the whole process is with regards to getting a drug approved. But they're giving it away. Fauci owns Gilead stock. Well, guess what? Gilead is probably in any of you that might have pension portfolios or own stocks through a mutual fund or an ETF. It's quite likely that you also own Gilead stock, and you know what? It hasn't really done very well on this. So you're not really making a lot of those people aren't making any money out of it, certainly. So that's wrong. And I could go on and on. There was a long list of stuff, and then it got all these stupid coincidences that Fauci and they both flew the same plane and landed at the same airport 2 days apart, and it's like, cut it out already. So just my point is, fact check, okay? Fact check everything, because you got to make decisions. It's just like with weather. Fact check. So you have to make decisions based on what works for you. Uh, I say that when it comes to hurricane season, when it comes to getting information from your local officials, because we can't give you the answers for your particular area. Your local people can. So, uh, you know,
And don't believe anybody who has a Sharpie,
no.
especially a black Sharpie.
Oh, good God.
Uh,
So anyway, this turned out to be a very interesting Sunday show. And for those of you, by the way, who think that maybe we should just stick to our subject matter, I would just kind of respond to that very respectfully by saying it's our show, so we can really talk
we
about
can
what
do
we
anything we
want.
want with it.
Exactly. So, you can always produce your own show and discuss whatever subject matter you would like. If we hire you as a producer, then you could tell us what we could talk about and not talk about. But I'm not hiring you as a producer, so this is our show.
Yes. No Jeopardy.
Nah, 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 nah.
I think the people on the chat board enjoy throwing questions, you know, for use as Briller or Veltman Jeopardy or something along those lines.
Oh yeah, no, I forgot. We had I have a couple of those. So hang on a second. All right, I got to move. Let me move.
And by the way, this morning on MeTV from 10 to 11 they run back-to-back episodes of the Flintstones, and one of my favorite episodes was on this morning at 10 o'clock, the one where they get involved with the Boy Scout Jamboree,
Oh, I remember that. Yeah,
and Fred actually
that's actually a very uplifting episode. I
it
always
is.
thought.
Fred and Barney start singing along with all of the kids,
Yeah,
and you see how even back in the Stone Ages there were various languages. They were singing the song in various, in French and in Italian and German or whatever like that. So it was, it was yeah, you're right. It was an uplifting episode. The thing I got a chuckle out of was at the end when the Boy Scouts come to Fred's house, and Wilma's on the phone ordering the food to feed all the Boy Scouts, and she's holding Pebbles, and after she orders like 2 tons of Bronto burgers and 1 ton of Tyrannosaurus ribs or whatever like that,
right.
Pebbles says, "Woo woo, Cape Goose." Oh yes, and 200 gallons of grape juice. But when Pebbles said, "Woo woo, Cape Goose," if you remember, when the show had its first run on the ABC network, the sponsor was Welch's grape juice, and that was the way Pebbles would say Welch's grape juice. So she put in a plug for the grape juice
Nice.
into the show.
Well, there is a commercial where Fred and Barney are smoking. I think it was Winston
Winston,
cigarettes. Yeah,
Winston cigarettes.
right. So here's Briller Jeopardy for this Sunday. So we've got two questions. This one non-weather related. Um, so there are 13 states that border Canada. How many? There are 13 states which border Canada. Name them.
Okay, well we have let's see, Maine and Washington and Idaho and Montana. See, I pride myself on the fact of geography. That's supposedly a very
Yeah,
weak.
this is an easy question for us.
Right.
I can just visually, I'm looking at the cross point, just visually seeing the top of the United States moving across in my head. So
Right.
yeah.
And I'm looking at the camera. I'm not looking at a map now, so you can tell I'm not, cheating here. Montana, North Dakota, Minnesota. Um, let's see. Does is Wisconsin? No, not Wisconsin. Kind of borders Lake Huron, I think. So it doesn't quite go over the. Michigan and New York State, of course. How many have I named so far?
Uh, there,
Vermont, New Hampshire,
right.
Maine.
I right.
I think I've gone across the
Okay,
country.
here's there is one you didn't name, but I'll give it. Okay, Washington, Michigan, Idaho, Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, New York, Ohio,
Ohio. Yes.
right?
Right.
Pennsylvania, Minnesota, Montana, North Dakota, and there's one other that you missed,
Oh, Alaska.
Alaska.
Alaska. All
Okay,
right. We forget.
and the second question is,
By the way,
um,
where Ohio is, there's a part of Ontario that juts out, and it's the furthest or the most southernmost part of Canada. It's called Paley Point. And so if you're down there, I think right somewhere in that vicinity is where Michigan and Ohio and I think Ontario all come together or all meet. So
so what are the other question is, what are the only two mobile national monuments in the United States?
mobile national
Two
monuments.
national monuments that I now I understand the question. Yeah, two national monuments that move.
Well, it can't be Mount Rushmore or the
No.
or the Washington Monument. Oh my goodness, that can move.
Yes.
Let me ask this one question: is it on a boat?
No.
No, I have no clue. What?
Um, it's an interesting question, and it's a very interesting. And I actually know I've been on both of them. The San Francisco cable cars
Oh,
are
okay.
considered a national monument, and so are the New Orleans St. Charles Avenue cable cars.
Really? I,
Yes,
I didn't know that.
yes, I didn't realize they were national monuments, but they are, and I've ridden both of them.
And one of those national monuments uh, used to be on a Rice-A-Roni commercial.
Rice-A-Roni, the San Francisco treat, or as we know from Wacky Packages, Minute Lice,
Minute
or
Lice.
Lice alone.
Oh, please,
No,
please.
well, there was Minute Lice, and then I think there was one for Rice-A-Roni, but I don't remember,
Right.
uh, what it was exactly called.
Or the Jolly Mean Giant.
Jolly me. I always liked
We're,
Mrs.
we've gone over an hour, and I'm sure we would to let people enjoy this beautiful
Yeah,
dinner.
no, I got to get
But
outside too. I got to do my
tomorrow
walk.
night we have to touch tomorrow night about the killer hornets,
Oh, right, the murder. I meant to bring
the
that up
murder
to you today.
hornets.
Yes, we got to talk about the murder hornets.
Yeah.
You know,
If there's not enough for the coronavirus,
now we
we have
got murder
something else
hornets.
now. So
I know, oh God. Anyway, yeah, we'll talk about that tomorrow. All right, have a great Sunday, Joe. Everybody, have a great Sunday. Thanks for everybody for being here. Really appreciate it as always, and we'll see you tomorrow.
yes, sir.